Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Not Content Podcast here on the From the Q Podcasting Network. My name is Jerome Q-Son. As always, leave a 4 or 5-star review on your favorite podcasting apps. This is a YouTube exclusive, so make sure you like and subscribe to us on YouTube. All the links to our social media channels can be found in the links below. We are doing YouTube specials just like we did for X-Men 97. We are now doing them for Batman, Caped Crusader. Last week, we discussed episodes 1 and 2. This week, we are discussing episodes 3 and 4. Episode 3, Kiss of the Catwoman. Episode 4, The Night of the Hunters. My co-host, as always, Brian. Brian, I gotta say that anytime that I see a character that's not Batman, I think Batman is kind of grandfathered in. Anytime I see a character with a cape now, I always think back to Edna Mode's rant about no capes. I see Catwoman with a cape, and I'm like, why did she not visit Edna Mode before building her costume?
Well, they even went classic purple with it too. Did you notice? They haven't done a classic purple Catwoman like ever. I know it's like the 40s style, so that's really cool. I was fully expecting the dark gray and the lack of cape and the lack of hair, to be honest. But they went with this old school look. It's very interesting because I like it a lot. And they didn't do the whole like she comes from the streets gimmick. She's coming from like an actual rich family. And she just doesn't know how to manage her money, which makes a lot of sense for a character like that, I guess. Which speaks to a lot of people today who don't know how to manage their money in terms of like young rich people. So that's kind of believable. And I like the way that Christina Ricci approaches the character. She's not over the top with it. She's just like right for the role. I like the way that she has interactions with Batman and the way they're kind of like they have good chemistry, like Christina Ricci and Hamish. So I like that, and I like the way they introduced the character. This plot for the third episode isn't like a great plot. It's a very simple plot just to introduce you to Catwoman, and of course Harley Quinn. That's a little later for the discussion, but this was a good intro for Catwoman. I liked it a lot. The only thing though, like, I don't know, maybe she's a little too naive and ditzy. Maybe I would kind of improve that. I think she should be a little smarter. But the whole thing about having her nanny like turn on her after all these years, like not paying her for 3 years and just shit like that, it just seems like she just doesn't know how to handle money. So that's a new twist on the character. But she's really good at stealing, which has always been the character. So that's going to be into kind of the contrast. And I don't know if she's going to be flat broke, like totally flat broke to the point where she's living on the streets like Selena Kyle is in the movies. But we'll see, because I like this little twist with the character, how she was like this elite person that lost all her money. So that's interesting as well.
As far as we know, this could change, but this is it seems to be a one-off appearance because she ends up in jail at the end of the episode. What I want to point out is that I don't know. I specifically told you to listen to the score. Did you do that?
I did, but I guess what the Catwoman like theme that kind of is like introduced in like Batman Returns that kind of comes again in Batman.
Absolutely. I mean, if it's not the exact score, it is something very, very close. I
think it's very close. It sounds like it because I know like in the Batman we hear the piano, right? Like I mentioned that piano during our review. But in this case, I hear strings. So that's why I was kind of like thrown off. Is like, is this what he was talking about? But it's always kind of like a homage to the Batman Returns theme with Michelle Pfeiffer. It's always going to be like that. Because if you listen to like even like the themes from like the 60s, nothing like that they came up with Catwoman. It was just all like just standard stuff. But it's really with the Batman Returns stuff is where they come up with the incredible idea of like the cat on a piano making noises kind of idea. And that's where you get that theme. So really cool homage to the classics on that one.
Yeah, I think what makes this episode so good is Christina Ricci's voiceover performance. I think it's one of the stronger ones that I've heard so far. I think the way that she is able to evade the law and just the way that, you know, her entire plot line plays out, I think it's really good. This, to me, was definitely, I don't know if it was as good as episode 2, but it was definitely stronger than episode 1. It kind of feels like episode 1 ultimately is the weakest of the 3 episodes that we have watched and discussed thus far. But the Bruce Wayne angle is something I feel like we have to address because Brian, I don't know if you know this, but Bruce Wayne, he went to therapy. How does that make you feel?
Well, he didn't really open up, did he? That was the best part. So like, so this idea for this particular Bruce Wayne is really interesting because it's kind of something I've been thinking about for Bruce Wayne's character for a while. Like in Batman the Animated Series, I think a lot of people can tell that Bruce Wayne was Batman, right? It just feels like they were very similar in terms of character traits, right? In this case, Bruce Wayne's public persona, he's trying to be an asshole that doesn't realize he's being an asshole kind of thing. So he's kind of, it's like, how can this asshole ever be Batman kind of idea? Which makes sense because you want to plant that idea in people's heads that this person could not be Batman the way he acts, right? So this idea that he's at the museum or whatever at the beginning, and then someone makes some kind of comment about his parents, so he used his opportunity to knock that fucking dude out. Like that was, I didn't expect that because you don't expect like Batman to do something that kind of shitty to someone, but he's under the Bruce Wayne persona, and then he has to go to therapy instead of going to jail, which again is another commentary on, the upper class getting away with crimes, which they kind of also um, make a commentary on later when Selena Kyle gets a second chance, which I found hilarious because I think that's kind of like a running theme with rich people nowadays that get away with stuff. It's like a second chance gimmick, and I thought that was a very interesting line. Probably probably one of the smarter lines in the show. But and then he goes to therapy, talks to Harley Quinn, and she's trying to dig deep into his soul, and you ain't gonna get shit. It's like he's got this protective wall, which he even mentions, and very different than the therapy scene from Harley Quinn, the show. But it just shows you that this guy is building this wall that obviously no one can break through unless you're really, really psychologically smart enough to outsmart Bruce Wayne and Batman. So it feels like Harley Quinn is trying to break that wall, and it's really frustrating her. And maybe that might be her kind of origin story as to why she becomes so obsessed with Batman. Maybe that's kind of like the twist on the character, and she doesn't need Joker. It's just this obsession with breaking down the walls of Bruce Wayne and finding out if it really is Batman, and this obsession, which is kind of what I'm kind of thinking was going to happen, is what's going to happen, is that she's going to realize that they're both Bruce Wayne and Batman, or she already knows, and this whole time she's just trying to prove it in this therapy session, but it just doesn't come out. Or the fact that he doesn't say anything maybe actually um, verifies the theory in her head that she is, or that he is Batman. So there's a lot to play with. I like this change on the character for Harley Quinn. It seems like she's independent, which is cool. Um, and I think there's some kind of like evil doings behind that facade that she's putting on. Because I like this idea that maybe she doesn't need some chemical in her face to change her or whatever, and let her just be Harley Quinn and let her be on her own path that leads her to that
Right, because
journey.
typically the way that she was introduced was as the Joker's sidekick, and the background that we always get with her character is that she was kind of turned from a legitimate therapist into basically a minion of the Joker's and a problematic romantic interest. And what would it be like if that wasn't the case? And we will see how that develops. But it's worth noting that, of course, Harley Quinn made her debut on Batman the Animated Series, and you have Bruce Timm, and you do have at least a couple of the same folks as Batman the Animated Series. So if anybody gets to play with that mythology, I think it's only fair that this is the team that kind of gets to do that. And again, it is worth contrasting. We are in a world where we have a Harley Quinn animated series. Harley Quinn has become a very interpreted character. We've seen the Margot Robbie version. We've seen Kaylee Cuoco's version. We have also seen her in Batman the Animated Series. There's a Batman and Harley Quinn movie that's really bad. But the therapy, when you contrast the episode of Harley Quinn that we put into the superhero pantheon and contrast it with this one, you're running into two very different situations. And clearly, with the Harley Quinn show, like Harley Quinn's the main character, so it only makes sense that she is the one that is the focus and is able to kind of reach Bruce. But in this case, our main character, despite what episode 4 might have you believe, is the main character is Bruce Wayne, Batman, and he is kind of going to be the one that has a lot of the agency. So he is not going to be as willing to let her in. But we also we do get some more corruption from the police as Flass and Bullock seemingly ready to kill Catwoman. Uh, Bruce Batman is not as willing to do so. So even though they're not getting romantic, Batman does not believe in murdering, and the no-kill rule still very much seems to be in effect. Even though we see Bruce Wayne kind of getting violent, we see Batman getting a little violent. The no-kill thing is still in effect.
I mean, yes, we did see that clip, and so there's been some Twitter comments about him driving the Batmobile and side swiping three dudes, but they survived. You know, they're just assholes. They survived. Yeah, I like Harvey Dent also having like the 1 minute scene he had with Catwoman or Selena Kyle. I thought that was really interesting because it's really setting it up that there's something dark and deep with this Two-Face right off the bat. Or I'm not going to say Two-Face. Harvey Dent. There's something wrong with this Harvey Dent right off the bat. There's no goody two shoes baby face or heel angle turn coming. Like he's just a straight up heel, I think, and I think that's a good twist of the character as well. And yeah, the Bullock. We'll talk about this in episode 4, but the Bullock and Flash thing is really interesting considering it's like who are they working for, right? Like, are they going to be revealed to be working for the Penguin, which I think is going to be happening, but. Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at on that. And the end of the episode was interesting. She gets arrested and put to jail again, but we'll see. Like I said, she's I don't know. We'll see if she goes to the poorhouse, so to speak, because it seems like the ending where her maid finally leaves her. She's all alone. All she has is the cats. Is she gonna cut her hair? I don't know. We'll see. I think if she cuts her hair, I think that'd be really kind of striking and really cool. But I don't know if they'll go with that angle. But yeah, fun episode.
Absolutely. I think that episode 3 clearly a step above episode 1. I don't know. It's maybe just a tick below episode 2. But now let's talk about episode 4, The Night of the Hunters. Brian, the first 10 minutes of this episode reminded me of a Wile E. Coyote Roadrunner cartoon because the police are trying to catch Batman, and Batman is just consistently outsmarting and evading them. And I kind of wish that the whole episode was just them desperately trying to get Batman and just failing miserably. And then the second part is what the second half of the episode is. I mean, that's part of the problem with this only being 10 episodes. It feels like they have limited real estate. So, nonetheless, I still think this is the strongest of the 4 episodes. I think that the way that they kind of bridge the gap between the philosophies of Gordon and Batman are important. We're going to talk about, I think, a moment that really just kind of hits home on that theme, but also just wanting to point out just how important it is that we see the corrupted cops actually get even more power and agency within the unit because of their actions and just making Gotham all the more corrupt. And we don't get like a notable villain. I mean, I would not necessarily consider him. I would not necessarily consider Firebug to be a major villain, but he definitely serves his purpose here and is just kind of a means to an end. We get a lot more with Montoya, and just she is kind of the one that at first is kind of taking charge of what's happening with Batman and trying to catch him because he is a vigilante. So the police logically are going to try to catch him. But by the end of the episode, Gordon, knowing how corrupt Bullock and Flass are, you can see you're starting to see, I think, the movement towards, okay, maybe Batman isn't so bad.
Oh, I think he knows that already, to be honest. But to be like, this episode felt like a dark Miami Vice episode, where it's like it's not necessarily Crockett and Tubbs, but it's probably like some 2 other cops, and you kind of follow them around and you realize that they're really dark, shady people, and these are the 2 cops that Crockett and Tubbs have to take out. And that's kind of what it felt like, because it just had these really dark moments where it's like corruption and like all that kind of stuff that you get from Miami Vice with the cops, especially the dirty cops in the show. So this was like really interesting, especially like, spoiler alert, the moment he shoots Firebug, I think is like really powerful stuff. Like the way it's shot, and it doesn't even look like Bullock shot him. It might have been Flash, but still, it doesn't matter. Yeah, that was a really interesting shot, because then the way the people look at the bottom on like at the bottom floor, because he's shot at like the fourth floor and it comes like come tumbling down, an amazing bump. But man, that was a really like eye-opening, like corrupt cop kind of moment, because I don't think I've ever seen that in a Batman show where Bullock or whoever just straight up kills a criminal without, you know, arresting them or reading their rights or anything. He just shoots them. But in this case, I don't know if it's actually justified or not, but it still doesn't matter because they let him go anyway on purpose, which is so like that's such a like a Miami Vice type of thing to do. But also I've been kind of waiting for like a visual, like a cool visual moment for the show, and when Firebug puts on the glasses, that was fucking awesome. I don't know how you felt about that, but I thought the color scheme changed immediately, and we see things from his perspective in the glasses, and it was just all like, obviously it's kind of like kind of a disturbing visual of fire all over the place, but it still looked kind of visually stunning. So yeah, that was really really cool visually. And then just some of the darker tones in terms of like the corruption really came through, and the
I
whole
mean, they're
chase at the
threatening
beginning
to
was
burn
good.
down, if not low income housing, then they're threatening to burn down a part of the city that is not very well off. So that's the angle that they're taking. And that is really disturbing. And Gordon has a connection to it. So they're clearly trying to connect some racial angles to it. And I think that's necessary. And that's something that probably don't see enough of. But I think when you're getting down to the fundamentals, when you're getting, I mean, fire is such a uncontrollable element once it gets started, and I think it's so threatening, and that's why we've seen it in other superhero movies before. I mean, I think about the scene in the first Spider-Man movie done by Sam Raimi. I mean, think about one of the best scenes of that movie is Spider-Man and Green Goblin in the fire, and I think this is a really strong episode because of the way that they use the character and the way that they do use fire to just make everything so threatening, and that you have to have Batman saving the kids and saving the people that actually live there. And eventually you get to this moment where Gordon is about to shoot Batman, but then Batman turns around and he has two kids that he is trying to save. And that is just, I mean, it is a great moment. I don't know, maybe I should have seen it coming, but I think it works perfectly. And I think you get a great reaction from Gordon too. And it really just kind of brings the idea of, okay, this system is very corrupt, but and Batman is a vigilante, but maybe he is the hero that we need right now.
For sure, and I just feel like Gordon kind of already knows this, and he's just, I don't know. I think him pointing the gun at Batman was kind of like instinctive. It felt like, but I think we're building to the moment where he's gonna build the bat signal, right? Like we haven't got that yet, and the way that his Batman's relationship with the cops are going right now, it seems like we're going in that direction. But of course, it's going to be hidden. Not obviously, it's not going to be in the station at the top of the building. It's got to be in some off place. But I think in the animated show, it was on top of the police building, was it not? I could be wrong on that, but like I said, I like it when they switch it up a bit and make it a little different, kind of like the Batman did, where it was like a completely different location than where the police were. Um, but they were still able to meet up because of the sign. So I'm looking forward to that moment, because then I think once you do that, you might actually add that particular shot to the opening credits, because that, of course, the opening credits in an animated series, the iconic shot of the bat symbol. So I feel like we're getting to that moment. I don't know if it's like going to be one of those origin story type moments where it's going to just be like the origin story of the bat signal or whatever, but it feels like that's what they're building towards after this episode. Um, but also, like, I wanted to point out that like the Firebug suit, it just feels like that fits the time period, right? So it feels like what they're going with is more grounded villains that are not so over the top in sci-fi, but fits like the time period. And I think this choice of this character Firebug is a really good choice, because he's not like physically overwhelming. It's just like fire everywhere. Once he ran out, it was it. So that was, okay, now we can arrest him, but they shot him instead. But like I said, more grounded is a very nice change of pace, because we're so used to like a Solomon Grundy or a Killer Croc or some crazy shit like that. But in this case, it's just more realistic with these villains, just like Catwoman, just like the Penguin. So I like where they're going with this. And based on the cast listing, it seems like we're just going to get basic villains for this, nothing over the top, not even a Joker. So it's a really interesting change of pace.
Yeah, I mean, I think the fact that the perspective is so much with the police in the first half of the episode, and I just think that this episode really gives us a chance to get to know the other characters. The other thing that I think is really notable is that Montoya has really become a centerpiece of the storytelling, and that's not something that you see a lot of. We did get a lot of Montoya in Birds of Prey, if you remember, but we don't really get her in a lot of Batman stories. So while the show is Batman Caped Crusader, we are getting a lot of focus on her. And I also think we're getting a really good interpretation of Barbara Gordon as well. You know, in the past, I think Barbara Gordon has been written to be very young and naive. And in this case, you are getting a character that is like not idealistic, but not clearly not all the way cynical. I mean, when you are a public defender, as she is, you know, she is going to be put in some really tough spots and tough situations. But she is clearly fighting for justice in a different way than her father. But I think that this interpretation of Montoya and Gordon is worth noting because it makes the show feel more of an ensemble piece than just being Batman. And I think again, we don't have a Bat team, we don't have a Robin, we don't have a Batgirl yet. So I think developing these two characters and look, Barbara Gordon may very well be Catwoman in the next couple seasons, or you know, she may never be. I'm assuming that Montoya is going to kind of be our important voice, but I think it's a really positive thing that we have these two characters that we are able to develop and get more insight about as opposed to just everything being Batman, Batman, Batman.
Yeah, I don't know. Based on the last shot of the episode, I don't know what they were implying with all three of them sitting there. It just made me feel like, are they implying that Montoya is what Barbara's mom? Which I know it seems kind of weird to say, but the way that the framing of that shot was, it almost seems like a family kind of gathering right at the table, even though they were in a restaurant.
I mean, it seems to me like they would be more implying that there's going to be some sort of a romantic relationship between the two.
Or already had, and then they had Barbara. So I don't know, because it just seems like they're older
No,
than.
I'm saying Renee and Barbara going together.
Oh, is that your theory now?
I mean, that to me seems much more likely because I mean Barbara is always Commissioner Gordon's offspring, so it just makes sense that they would be a potential coupling as opposed to a mother and daughter.
Interesting. So that's where you. Okay, so we're almost on the same page based on the last shot of where are they going with this. Why does this look like so much like a close knit family thing? Where are they going? So yeah, so that was your official theory that you were spouting on
So
on the text, right?
I think my theory is a little bit more broad. And I actually have so the theory that I have is that I think a lot of the response to Batman as of late has been you have this character who is a billionaire, and the idea that he can do more and be more effective as Bruce Wayne using his money to do right as opposed to being a vigilante. And I think in order to counter that, I think the show and any Batman interpretation that we see moving forward, I think it's really important that you show just how baked in the corruption is. That this is not just a matter of just the police being corrupt or just a certain segment of the police being corrupt. It is corruption at every single level. And I think that's what's going to make the show sing a little bit more and justify the existence of Batman. And I think they've done a spectacular job of making the police really corrupt, but also showing how the mayor can be manipulated as well. So you have kind of the law being manipulated, you have the political forces being manipulated. I don't know that we're necessarily going to get beyond that in terms of the corruption and the evilness, but I think really just baking in the corruption, that is why you need Batman. And again, I think if you're going to justify having the character, I think those are the things that you want to do. And I think they're taking a lot of the right steps to justify why this Gotham needs Batman. And the other thing that I want to say, and this is not necessarily related to this show specifically, but I think in some ways the best thing that ever happened to Batman was the 1966 version of the show And the reason that I say that is that I feel that because of that show, because of how wacky it is, and because of how different it was, I feel like people are much more willing to accept different versions of Batman and different interpretations of the character. Whereas I feel like with a lot of other mediums and other IPs, like I'm specifically thinking of Star Wars, that you really have not had a chance to broaden horizons as much with a Star Wars. Whereas with Batman, you do have this kind of wacky interpretation that is so baked into the culture that you can afford to have this show, but you can have the Batman, the Brave and the Bold, and you can have Lego Batman, and you can have the Nolan version and the Burton version, and you could do all these different versions of Batman. And I think that is a positive thing. And again, not every Batman is designed for every person, but I think what has made this show so good is the fact that it is not a continuation of the animated series, even though that's what it was intended to be. But what I think has made the show work is that they have grounded the characters, but they have also done a really good job of kind of changing and tweaking the backgrounds of the characters as well, so that we can have a female Penguin that feels plausible, that we can have a Dr. Harley Quinzel that is separate from the Joker. And for the purposes of this episode, we can have a more developed and well-rounded police force that's not just Commissioner Gordon, but that is Bullock and Renee Montoya.
Yeah, I agree. I think that makes a lot of sense the way you kind of laid that argument out. Um, I mean, we're all Batman 66 fans here for sure. And it makes sense because it kind of counters the wackiness and the craziness, and it allows the audience to kind of be open to interpretations, and that makes a lot of sense. Like if Star Wars ever had that, I don't know. I guess you would kind of look back at maybe the Star Wars Christmas special or something like that, but not a lot of people vibe with that anyway, so it's not going to really work. So everyone has that serious interpretation that is really
And I
people are
think
really
that the
strict
part
to.
of the part of the problem is that I think the holiday special was just so bad that I think that they made the decision that we are not going to expand this as much. And I think in the long term, I think it's done a lot of damage. I think that Star Wars needs to be broadened and opened up. And the fact that it hasn't been has led to where we are right now. Whereas with Batman, it feels like you can go in any number of ways. You can do a childlike version. You can do a more adult, grounded version. You could do something that's kind of straddling both. But I mean, I'm a huge fan of the way that the show is kind of doing different things, even if I don't think the show is perfect and I don't think the show is completely successful. But I do really think that I do appreciate that the show is taking different swings.
For sure. I also wanted to point out one last thing. Hamish Linklater's performance really stepped up in these last two episodes. I think he's really made the distinction between the voice of Bruce Wayne and the voice of Batman, because he immediately switches the tone immediately once he's talking to Alfred, and it clicks. It's almost like he figured out the whole Clark Kent Superman thing that Christopher Reeves was doing, except instead of like broadening his shoulders and standing up straight, he just switches the vocal cords in his voice, and it really works. So he figured it out. It took a couple episodes to get there, but now I'm used to it, and I like the distinction that he makes between Bruce Wayne and Batman. So credit to Hamish Linklater. He's really stepped it up, I think. And I'm looking forward to more episodes. I still don't know where Haley Joel Osment's going to fit in all this, because it says here Anton Knight, and I don't even know who that is, and that's not even like a major villain. So I'm really curious to see how he fits in, because I feel like he's kind of an underrated vocal performer. Like, even though he doesn't have the on-screen presence anymore like he did as a kid, I think his voice still like works in terms of like animated properties and stuff like that. Um, yeah, that's kind of like if you watch Tusk, he's certainly not a guy that is ready for on-screen stuff a lot in terms of like the way he looks with the beard, and I don't know, but his voice work is still good enough to work like this. So I'm really curious to see how he performs.
I am as well. I am extremely excited to see what we have to look at next. If you look at Amazon Prime in the screenshot for episode 5, it feels like it's kind of a spoiler. I'm not going to say what it is, but I am very, very much looking forward to discussing episode 5 It seems like we're going to get some important background on a particular character. So we have that to look forward to. As always, make sure that you are checking out our other podcasts and listening to our various discussions. August is Jim Carrey month, so make sure that you are checking all of that podcast goodness out, plus our YouTube channel here at From the Queue, the non-content podcast. For Brian, I'm Jerome. Thank you so much. We will talk to you again next week to discuss episodes 5 and 6.